Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this Friday. It's May. When did that happen?
I know.
So, well, welcome. We're so excited to have you here for our Friday Lunch and Learn Playwriting Prompt. On behalf of Primary Stages and the ESPA family, I welcome you. For those of you who are new to us, Primary Stages, we're an off-Broadway theater company in New York City. ESPA is the school that's part of Primary Stages, the Einhorn School of Performing Arts for established and emerging artists. And we are so excited to be able to connect with you in your home right now. We're sad that we can't be with you in our studios and in person, but for now, Zoom will have to do. My name is Kelly Letourneau. I'm the ESPA Student Services Associate. I have filled your inboxes if you have attended a Lunch and Learn previously. And if you're new today, I will continue to send you emails, and you are always welcome to send me an email with your questions. My email address is kelly@primarystages.org. That's Kelly. My name is probably right underneath me in one corner or other. We are so excited today to have Stefanie Zadravec with us for our playwriting prompt. Stefanie is an ESPA faculty member. She is also a resident playwright at New Dramatists and a core writer at the Playwright Center of Minneapolis. Her full-length plays include Tiny Houses, Colony Collapse, The Electric Baby, Honey Brown Eyes, and currently she's working on The Boat. And is it Nori, Stefanie? Nowry?
Oh, never. Actually, that's called Tomorrow Will Take Care of Itself. I need to.
Tomorrow will take care of itself. I mean, if that's not a mantra to live by right now, I don't know what is. Stefanie's also an alum of the W Theater Lab, the Lark Playwrights Workshop, and Keene Company's Playwright Lab. You can read her plays. They're published by Dramatist Play Service and featured in Best Women's Stage Monologues, Smith and Krause, and the Kilroy's 97 Scenes and Monologues by Women and Trans Writers, the first volume. I'll include that in my follow-up email to you all so you can read up on Stefanie. How are you today, Stefanie?
I'm good. I have just escaped homeschooling, so that's the best thing for the day. For a couple of hours, which I don't normally get to do. So that was great.
Well, we're excited. We're excited for you to lead kind of our education and playwriting for this next hour.
Awesome. I'm sorry, I'm just viewing things. There you go. Okay.
Shall we just dive into some of those questions? And I always like to start with how do we begin? What's your first step when you're approaching a blank page, a blank canvas?
Usually I have some image. Like lately it's been like photojournalism. My plays are sort of a combination of like politics or a historical event mixed with sort of a magical realism, sort of storytelling kind of vibe in there. Sort of, I often have many storylines going on and then they sort of orbit around each other until they connect, which is part of the prompt that I gave. And I was always like, oh, this is such an interesting style I've sort of developed. And then I realized like my father was a journalist and my mother was a poet. And then I was like, oh, duh. I'm like total combination of the two. So when I begin, it's usually like I saw something or heard a news story and then I kind of like I go into the photograph, like in my mind, I'm like, I'm the old woman in that photograph and I'm, you know, that happened to me. And then some scene just starts coming and it spins for a while until I feel like I have it, like it has to come out, but I don't structure, let me move. I feel like I'm a silhouette. I don't structure my plays until at least after page 50 or even sometimes like 3/4, like right when you're supposed to have like the big event and I'm like, I don't know what it is. And then I sort of start over or I gather a group of actors to read it and tell me back what they just read, because sometimes I'm not even aware of everything that, like if I weren't in a writer's group or something that's coming. And then as I build towards the end, because what I knew about was sort of the well-structured play, the Aristotelian like formatted play, but I realized I write circularly structured plays. And I've had students who like, they have some phenomenal character that's like speaking direct address and they don't quite know why. And then some other teacher's like, well, if you don't know why, you have to cut it. You have to, I mean, eventually you have to answer that question. But in The Electric Baby, that character who speaks to the audience was like, her voice like came to me and like, I just wrote it, but I didn't know the why until I had done one of those things where a group got together and my director misspoke because the woman had a lot of folklore. She's like, yeah, all the folk tales and stuff. Like, I just love that. And then I went, boom. And then folk tales, I went home and I threw in all these stories. And then you learn in the big story that her grandmother that she had been raised with had said, when you have a child, you'll tell it everything you know. And she has this kid who's was born and was gonna die within like a few months of life. So that's why she's continually talking and telling her everything she knows. So I didn't figure that out until I was almost through with the draft, but the impulse, the creative impulse was so strong and I had her voice. I could have written for her for days. And so I also teach like not to work. You may not have all the answers. You never have all the answers in a first draft. So structure comes second. But then I know that eventually I do have to figure all that stuff out, you know.
The questions are more important than the answers.
Yeah.
I always think, especially in art making, playwriting.
And
I'm just
there's little things that strike people along the way, and like a group of actors or whoever around the table are like, I love how this happened, and then and then later he talks about birds, and then you know, and you haven't even put that together sometimes, and you're like, oh yeah, right, okay, good. So I think sometimes that next draft is where you start to realize the themes that you've written and also bring those out, you know.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to just really quick, this quote is so beautiful, I'm going to read it out loud and then stop the screen share just so folks can see us a little bit more. And then when we go into the writing prompt, I'll reshare. So from Vincent van Gogh, in spite of everything, I shall rise again. I will take up my pencil, which I have forsaken in my great discouragement, and I will go on with my drawing.
Yes, I thought that might be nice because I know that in some of my classes, people are in their house, like they had a routine of going to work and then going home or going somewhere to write, and they're finding it hard to like transition, or they're like, I could only write 5, like their heads are in a fog at the end of the day. So I just wanted to like take a quote that I felt could work for this moment.
It definitely works for this moment. How are you finding this shelter in place is affecting your work? I mean, it's definitely affecting your life. You have to homeschool now.
Yeah, and I have a special needs son, so I have to do, well, I have 2 kids, but one special need. I have to do one-to-one with him the whole time, or he'll run away from the computer, or to do the stuff we do off the computer. Like first his school one day had him in 4 Zoom classes in a row. I was like, he cannot sit still in a chair for 2 hours. Like he has to like, wow. So I told them like they broke that up, but like he needs a lot of breaks and he needs a lot of redirection. So that's exhausting. Because even when he goes to school, there's like 7 different teachers that rotate. And I was like, and now it's just me. And there's a random cat that just walked in the door to this apartment. I'm gonna open the terrace, hang on. I have the door open.
Is that your cat?
No, and it's
just a random cat.
I think it's the cat that belongs to the balcony next door. And I was like, there's a cat here. So my time is at night. My neighbors who are also writers, they have a house upstate. So that's where I come to teach and I slip away to write. But some nights I'm just in a brain fog. I'm just like, either from being tired or just like, yeah, like the idea of diving into the larger thing I need to work on is like overwhelming, but I've started like making a little routine. So I think I've always said like I'm not a daily writer anyway, being a parent. And even before, when I began, I was also an actor and I had other jobs. And so, you know, there's always that idea of to be a good writer, you must get up at dawn and write every morning and keep a journal and do all that. It's just not a reality in my life. And so instead, and it's changed as I had kids. When they were little, they napped, so I could write at little bursts then. But to schedule like 3 2-hour sessions a week to write, and then if you miss one, to reschedule it like you would a shrink appointment or something where they're going to charge you if you cancel within 24 hours. So like if something came up and that was during your time that you had allotted for writing, you just have to make it up in the week, but you actually have to block it out in your schedule. Just to get the discipline of being able to sit down and focus and write and like not go on social media or answer emails or whatever.
Oh, that is the challenge right now.
Yeah, right.
Totally. Natty wrote in and they want to know, what's your favorite stage of a play development process?
Oh, I think like when you know enough about your play that you can start, like it's maybe a few drafts in and you're workshopping, where you can, like sometimes when people tell you things, you're like, it's gonna all unravel because you're sort of tentative, or people bring things up and you don't even, like I write a lot of, people play multiple roles in my play and I don't always, like, I can't yet keep track of all the trajectories, even myself. And I'm like, but where you feel like you can move things around or throw something out without that feeling that it's the whole spool is going to come undone. And so that's my favorite point. And then I just never want to stop, like rewriting, and I'm like, oh, what could happen here? And like you feel confident enough with your basic draft. That's my favorite.
You've done a lot of residencies. I actually went on to the Space at Ryder Farms website like a couple of months ago when they were accepting submissions, and the first picture I saw was your face. I was like, it's Stefanie. What tips do you have for playwrights as they embark on that sort of residency? When we can do that again.
Like, you mean if they've gotten it, how to use it? For me, there is a certain socializing. You have to go to the 3 meals at Ryder Farm, which is great. But sometimes like when you've been writing all day, it takes me like a while to like talk, or like not to worry so much about being like the one that there's that part of you that's like, I want to be the one they really like and they want to invite back. And, and I've kind of accepted, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, everyone's so young and I'm like the old fart mom in the group, and sometimes there's a group of older people there. Cause when I did the working residency, you go for 5 different weeks. But you're so well fed and you do get time to hang out with people. But like at night, I would kind of, for me as a parent of 2 very loud boys, like that's the time where even if I'm not writing, I'm allowed to, like, when I've been writing now and I turn it off, I have like people talking in my face all day long, like, or whining or fighting, or, and so that's like a time where I can have been writing, and then like at night I can do a deep dive on YouTube about something that came up in the writing, or like I get to have that play just hanging in my head. And my husband and I have a little agreement that, I mean, if we need to call each other, it's like, I hate these people, or he's having some issue at work or something, certainly. But unless like the children's limbs are falling off, it's like, I just send a video to the boys that he shows them at night and they send one back. But I don't want to feel obligated to like leave a dinner where I am. Like that's my week or my 2 weeks. And I think that's where I can get the bulk of like rough drafts done. Mm-hmm. Or like a big rewrite, because it's just that dedicated time. And then it's in nature. So then you can also take walks. I think like here, when we work, we're supposed to be working, but you forget that like walking is part of like, that's where like ideas come to you. Walking, running, when the shower's putting water on your head, So, and it's always like really nice people. That's one thing about Ryder Farm, is like, it's like the friendliest place. Yeah.
It seems idyllic. It just
Yeah.
seems. Um, you've spoken in context of the residency and like right now, balancing being an artist and a parent. What has that journey been like for you, like outside of a residency or outside of our current situation, if this question makes any sense?
Like normally,
Yeah.
I think,
How do you balance it?
I've had a little bit of a tough, like my kids were born premature. Like I've never been a writer without being a parent. So I don't know how the non-parents do it. I just know they get to go away. But my kids were born premature and each almost died. Then one had a rare lung disease where we had to finally go to Pittsburgh to find one of the 5 doctors. He was on oxygen for 2.5 years. So I couldn't, I can't go to Sundance for a month and he can't get on a plane. Then he was diagnosed with autism, and then 2 years later, my other son went into liver failure and was on the transplant list, and then miraculously, after a year on steroids, got better. So it was a lot, and it's still a lot because as they grow up, it's like, I thought it would be easier now, but now they have like, I have basketball team, and they have emotional, like kids at school, you know, they're going into middle school next year. But I did the Dramatists Guild Fellowship, and you get paired with a mentor. In fact, I think she runs it now, but Diana Sohn, I wanted a parent. And so I got Diana Sohn, who also has twins. She has 3 kids. And I was like, so how do you balance? And she just laughed in my face. And she's like, there is no balance, there's only juggle. And so I think, like, again, that kind of falls into my acceptance that, like, when I'm writing at home, it's a lot of rewriting, and when I go away to residencies, it's a lot of the like bulk of the draft writing, or if I have a workshop coming up, I sort of block off time. And then and that I don't write every day. I would love to write every day, but I can't. I mean, there's like, now I don't remember my parents having to show up at school for everything, but nowadays you have to show up, like, to see them like draw a picture. It's insane. Like, I don't know why. I don't remember unless I have like a chorus concert, I don't remember them being at school. But there's all this like, parents, come and be involved, and you know, and then you feel guilty if you can't go. But yeah, and then also in that regard, I just, you know, you start out and you kind of want to do things, and then I'm just like, I'm going to be the one who brings plastic forks or paper cups, and not the one who makes the cupcakes. You know, like, I'm just not going to be perfect. So I'm out of the parenting competition.
Well, I have to say, I'm getting some messages in from folks that are saying thank you for speaking to this because they can really relate. So yeah. It's a juggle, not a balance.
Yeah.
Great. And, you know, by not allowing yourself to be perfect, you let yourself off the hook to juggle. And maybe once in a while, drop a ball or 2.
I remember my mom was a poet, and I remember, like, she picked me up from school one day, and I was like, how come you're not the room mother? In those days, you had a room mother, and they did everything. And she, like, wrenched the car to the side of the road, and she was, like, smoking. And she's like, I do other things. And I thought, like, gosh, she's so horrible. And now I'm like, I do other things. Like, I don't have to do that. Because if I don't write, I don't have money, so I have to write. Anna?
So actually, Kelsey wrote in, and she wants to know, when you do edit or begin your second draft, where do you start? What are you looking for in the first? When do you know it's time to go on to the second? I mean, I think people talk like first and second draft, when truly there's usually like 7 drafts or 10, you know, like there. And I've become, because I don't write every day, I remember someone told me that, oh God, she wrote God's Ear. Why am I blanking on her name? She's amazing. Jenny Schwartz. Every time she sits down, she starts from the beginning. And I was like, who would do that? And some people do that from blank. I know Lucas Nath did it one time, like just start without the old draft. I could never do that. It's too scary. But I will just start at the beginning. And I will often start at the beginning every time I sit down to write that first 50-page chunk. And what happens is, because like I'll hear it, I'll go back, see what I wrote yesterday, I'll end up editing. So it takes longer, and then I'll move forward.
and then I'll do that again, and then I'll move forward. But what happens is then when I'm at page 50, I have like, I've filled in the like it was a rough sketch with pencil, and then it's a watercolor, and it's just thicker. And so finally, when you have to kind of zoom to the end, you have so much more information about the beginning of the play. So I do sit down. There's a point at which I sit down from the beginning of the play every single time I sit down, which is why I've become worse and worse at making my deadlines.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Also, I'm very good at writing a little list at the end. Like if I did have a quick reading at the end of a first draft of just like collected people of either myself or some big issue from other people, but usually you can hear it yourself of like, oh yeah, no, fix that, fix that, fix that. Big things, I call it a punch list. So it could be like restructure Act 1 to exclude this, and it could be like take out the line about the peaches in the bar scene. You know what I mean? Like I just, everything. So I kind of keep a little list.
Like a to-do, like a punch list, a to-do list.
Yeah, and what's amazing, I had a reading of a very raw first draft of a play with the theater, and then I went into a meeting the next day with Daniela Topol, who's a genius, and she's like, because I thought we were there to be like, were we approved or not approved? And she was like, so I think we all agree there's something really special here. What I think the next steps and would be is like a workshop in the fall, because like, and I had already like had my list of things that I could hear. And she was like, you're really good at kind of, when you know what you want to work on next, then the conversation, you don't hear it from other people what they want to change about your play. And something I do when I teach is like trying to get people to figure out what's next, because it can also help form the conversation between you and a theater, where they're not suddenly like rewriting your play or making you doubt yourself. You're like, so this is I worked on this in the draft, and I think the next thing I want to look at is this. And then they tend to fall into your conversation rather than, I mean, I take the big comments from people I trust, but not from everyone.
How do you deal with things that are a little more discouraging? Is it the navigating it to invite them to your conversation, like you're saying?
It's that, like I remember I had, when I did Colony Collapse, I was going back and forth to LA, and there was, it was the tech run through, the designer run through.
Yeah.
And then there was this conversation about whether, the director called, she was like, well, there was a conversation about whether the main character was likable. And I said, well, I don't care about likable, but I said, can I ask you a question? Was he recently off book? Was he more, I mean, having been an actor, it's like sometimes you're just off book and you just go out there and it's all, so he's probably like angry in every scene or something, you know, because he was just like lines. And he had a huge load. And I said, so if he's just, I said, is that the kind of performance you were getting in rehearsal, the nuance and everything in the scene? I said, so let's not make that decision based on him. That run was for the designers. It wasn't an acting run. And then the other thing was their dramaturg, who hates everything, sat in and had taken notes, but she wasn't the dramaturg. She wasn't in rehearsal. She wasn't in discussions about where we were going. And it was like, oh, she has some notes for you. And I had tried to talk to her a few times before we went, but she was one of those people who feels she knows your play a little better than you do. But then when you're like, tell me, she'd be like, well, and it was almost like, I'll just give you a bit because I think that's what you can handle, you know. And then the dramaturg we had on this production was amazing. He was like really quiet, and then at the end he'd just ask a question, and I was like, oh my God, you're a genius. That, like, it was the question that needed to be asked, and it was like nothing else. So what I said in that moment was, I said, great, but you know what? I'm gonna come out next week for rehearsals. Let me just see it, because since I haven't seen the new draft up on its feet, and then yeah, I'll look at those. And then of course, once you are there and watching it, my director and I would go out to the diner every night after rehearsal. It's like, I never got the notes, because it's like we were on to talking about what we wanted to talk to, and we sort of had our process back. So you can say, yeah, I just want to see the next rehearsal. And then like, like be really nice, like not defensive, but like, I'm not going to listen to you. You're not, you know, it was just, she had a way that was like, I felt like very not playwright friendly. Like, you know, which I've never found before. I've always had great dramaturgs or directors. So she gave me a bad vibe.
Bad vibes. We don't want bad vibes. I'm really missing a diner. Now that you've mentioned a diner, I'm dreaming about like the next time I can go and get like a really big omelet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, oh man. How about one more question and then we'll dive into the writing prompt. So the last question we have is, do you have any tips on how to increase your chances for getting into residency?
Well, take my workshop. No, I do a workshop and I do it privately, but I actually think the workshop is better because when you're in a group with other writers, it's like you get 8 times the benefit if it's 8 people, you know, because you're learning from that person's application and that, oh, that's good, you know. I did find that year that my son was on oxygen and I applied to 5 fellowships in New York and I got every single one, and 2 I couldn't do. And if I could take it back, I would have done those 2 instead of the 2 that I did, just because they were the ones I really wanted, but they came to me later. And I was like, well, if I do all of these, I will be not home any night of the week, you know. So my kids were like 2 at the time. And that was when I kind of learned. And then when I was in the Women's Project Lab, I would read, all the other writers were like, will you look at my application? You're good at this, you're good. And I don't know how they thought it, but I think having been an actor, I find giving a play to someone so much easier than sending out a postcard with your face on it saying like, I'm on Law and Order next week, you know? And it's like, I have something to offer that isn't me. So this whole second career is like gravy to me. And I don't feel like I'm on the ego up and down with like, oh, a rejection, oh, you know, because this was not something I set out to do. It was like something I sort of finally realized is like, oh my God, I'm a writer, you know? Like, so I've had a much more logical progression in my career. I'm like one thing to the next. So I feel like it's just so clear, like, this is what you should be doing. So I think it's a balance of finding the mission of what you do, finding the language to talk about it, finding that way to get rid of that sort of general speak of like magical realism mixed with the, you know, like, same thing with writing, be as specific as you can, really shortly tell some specific thing that, you know, like in a play, you could have someone like slam the knife down or take the butter away from her husband when he's about to butter his toast. And it tells you so much about like the seething thing of that. So if you can find that little nugget story, which could be anything, it could be like, I write African-American plays from my family, but you know, like it can be, I add the rhythm of this and that in the speech, but like to find artistically what you do and some way to drop in something about yourself. Because that year I got all those fellowships, but also I had gotten 2 calls saying, your essay was incredible. And so like someone was like, you should do this. And so over the last several years, I've developed this workshop, which I do with you guys once a year, but I'm also doing it online in May. So
yes, she is, and I'll be including it in the email to everyone.
I just love to teach that class because I think it's really fun. And I think it's something that everyone who approaches an application has something that they fucking hate. Like, if they ask that question, like, why are you an emerging writer? And it's like, God damn it, you know, or you feel too old, or you're just out of school and you don't have enough on your resume, or any of those things. And I didn't go to grad school and I didn't write a play till I was 38. So, you know, like I studied at ESPA. That's where I learned playwriting. So with Dan O'Brien and Rogelio. So like, people come to it, you have to find a way to frame yourself in a really confident way. And I do find that writers are far too self-deprecating. So I help people like knock that out. I
have one more question. I'm sorry. How did you come to the realization that you were a writer?
I think it was the summer after like 9/11. So it still took me 5 years to write a full length after that or whatever. I took a class with Beth Links, and it was like the first 10 pages you had to bring in. And for some reason I had to leave the class early that night, and she just followed me out of the room, and she was like, because she was like, oh, Stefanie, I have to finish telling you that thing before you go. And she just followed me into the hall, and she goes, I know you think you're an actor, but you're really a writer. And I was like, and I was like, I don't know how to structure a play, and I was like, she goes, I can teach you structure, I can teach you that, but she's like, what you did with your dialogue is like, that to writing is what comic timing is to acting. You can't teach it. And so I was like, oh, but for years I just wrote like 10-minute plays because my identity was that of an actor. And then my first play, I got really lucky. I wrote a play just to write a play. And it was like the first, like, how do you write a play? And then I got lucky. A friend of the family called who'd come back and she'd been directing. And she goes, do you have anything for the Washington Fringe Festival? So I sent her the first version of Honey Brown Eyes. And she called me back and she goes, this isn't Fringe Festival. And she walked my play over to Theater J in Woolly Mammoth, and Theater J read it around a circle and called me and was like, we want to put it in next season. And it was like the first draft, like nothing happened in Act 2. So I was like, okay. Like it was a really bad Act 2. So, and then it won the Helen Hayes. And so I kind of had like a boom, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But my first play was really like cliche. It was like the two sisters, one's liberal, one's conservative, and it was very like four walls and sitcom-y. And then I had an agent, and people liked the writing, but they were like, it feels, and she goes, everybody wants a war play. And I was like, I didn't know anything about the Iraq War or anything. So I was like, fine, fuck it, I'll write a war play. So it's set in the Bosnian War, which I did know about. And also it changed my writing because I'd never been there. It was much more like, there's this TV with a sitcom laugh track while all these bad things are like, this guy's like trying to rape a woman and it's got this weird laugh track. And like, I found writing about what I don't know, I'm like a write what you don't know writer. It opened me up to like, oh, this is so much more interesting rather than writing like some couched version of the relationship I have with my evangelical sister. So that's giving myself permission to write things that I don't know, which I think is important today. I mean, there's issues of appropriation and whose stories, who's to tell. And I certainly feel there are stories that are not mine to tell. But I also feel like we have to have the courage to reach beyond, and still know that we have to create the world we live in, which is everybody. So
how do you give yourself the permission to write what you don't know? Like, how do you know, like, this is the story I should write, as opposed to the stories that aren't?
Well, like, so I was writing this story based on things I found interesting about the Bosnian War. And one was it's a famous image of a woman in Sarajevo, like going to work, but she's running along Sniper Alley. So she's got her briefcase and her little pencil skirt, and she's running, and they would shoot down. And I was always like, I would think about that, like if a bomb blew up in Israel, I was like, how do people just go about life when this, I mean, now we all know, because it's happening here now too, but like, how do you go to work in the middle of a war, And that was like, I just dove in there. And so, and where I got stuck, I found a Serbian friend who was a DJ, and I said, what music were you listening to in the late 80s? And it was the same music I was listening to, but with different language. And so the main characters are these two guys who used to be in a new wave band that were like right before the 90s were supposed to have this big thing, and then one of them left the band. And I was like, guys in bands, like that's all I dated like for high school and college. So I was like, I know this. And so
you found your way in.
But the first like talkback performance in DC, the audience is very politically and like aware. So I had like someone from womenforwomen.org, the Bosnian ambassador, like somebody else, some other expert, and my director and us on stage, and people were commenting and asking questions of all of us. And then these two hands shot up and they were like, hi, we were in Sarajevo during the war, and we're from Sarajevo, and like my heart sank like into my stomach. I just went, oh God, because I certainly didn't write the story of the beginning of the war for people who actually lived through it. I hadn't even been to there at that point. And they're like, we just want to know. It's like, how did you know we all live in our kitchens? And it's like, because everybody lives in their kitchens. And that I realized that my play about me and my sister, like the liberal and the evangelical, were really stereotyped. And then I've had so many people from that part of the world, like some other woman was like, how does she know all this about us? And it's just research. I love to like research videos, talking to people, like what was the music? What kind of sneakers did people wear? And she was almost angry that I had all these details. And then another person asked, another couple wanted to make a film of it, and they'd done 1 million films in their own country, and he goes, they're like, oh, it's the stereotype of a Serb and the stereotype of a Bosnian, and it's just like, they're awful. How did you, we saw the play, and I was like, because I don't know the stereotypes of a Bosnian versus a Serb. I know some general, but like, I don't know all the behavioral ones, and so I don't tend to write into the cliche because I don't know it. And so that was like the thing that gave me permission after that. Like, I was like, okay, like a totally superstitious grandmother who yells at everybody, who's Hungarian, is the same as one who's like Puerto Rican's grandmother who would like be like, put some herbs on your chest, go do this, or the Russian like there are some things that are just true about people.
Totally. Well, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen and we shall dive in to this writing prompt. Here we go.
The first thing, I just wanted to take a quick 5-minute writing to answer this question for yourself. So that's on the next page. So just like free write, and you don't have to share it.
About 45 seconds left. And that's time.
Awesome. If anyone had any thought or you can share it or not. But I think about this a lot in plays when people ask. I think of myself as writing hopeful plays, but they're also incredibly dark. And so it's some kind of like upset, like someone said there's always one story you're always retelling, and it's hard to think that because you're like, my plays are so different. But I think some bit in the back of my head is like, as a kid, like loving Pandora's box. And so I've kind of like, I read anything on hope or talk about it, and I realize that, and over time people are like, hope is a small gesture in a dark moment. Whereas things people think of as hopeful, it's like this glossy romantic comedy with Jennifer Aniston and Diane Keaton, and it's where that's all very predictable and kind of wishful. I think that hopeful plays can be profound. Even Blasted has like a tiny, like granular moment of hope. And so that's just something I think when I'm always trying to answer as a writer about, and because I write about like wars and things like that, like I'm always just like, how do we live in that? You know, how do people find themselves in these situations? So that's why I like to think about, yeah. And I think
Thomas I was going to say Thomas has volunteered to share his sentence.
Oh yeah.
Thomas, I'm just finding you. Let me unmute you. Hi, Thomas.
Hi. Thanks for your prompt, Stephanie. I just wrote in the 5 minutes, 2 sentences. And it provoked me to think the difference between hope and wishful thinking is reality. Wishful thinkers suspend reality while hopers imagine its future.
That's great. That's totally, I love that. Yeah, if anyone wrote something they kind of like but don't want to share publicly, will you email it or like send it to me? Because I like them. I like to hear what people find or a story of hope or a thought about it. It's like my little side study. The next thing I wanted to do is just read this poem that I'm just so keen on, because the other thing, and it goes with the prompt about some like not talking about the thing that's really the thing. You know, like, you know, the kind of thing where you can be in the middle of like the worst thing, but the thing that makes you completely blow up is you can't find your keys, you know, those kind of things. And just also because of the way life is or may be economically or for any of us going forward, it's a weird thing, but I find it a hopeful poem. So I'll read it, or does someone want to read it? What the Living Do by Marie Howe. Johnny, the kitchen sink has been clogged for days. Some utensil probably fell down there, and the Drano won't work but smells dangerous, and the crusty dishes have piled up waiting for the plumber I still haven't called. This is the everyday we spoke of. It's winter again. The sky's deep, headstrong blue, and the sunlight pours through the open living room windows because the heat's on too high, and in here I can't turn it off. For weeks now, driving or dropping a bag of groceries in the street, the bag breaking, I've been thinking, this is what the living do. And yesterday, hurrying along those wobbly bricks in the Cambridge sidewalk, spilling my coffee down my wrists and sleeve, I thought it again. And again later when buying a hairbrush. This is it. Parking, slamming the car door shut in the cold. What you called that yearning, what you finally gave up. We want the spring to come and the winter to pass. We want whoever to call or not call, a letter, a kiss. We want more and then more of it. But there are moments walking when I catch a glimpse of myself in the window glass, say the window of the corner video store, and I'm gripped by a cherishing so deep for my own blowing hair, chapped face, and unbuttoned coat that I'm speechless. I'm living. I remember you. And I thought of that both in all the living that we've had to give up, in like the things that we must miss, like, you know, like if you do go out for your daily walk and you're like, oh my God, spring, it's like feels so much more beautiful. And also just if you're trapped inside with someone and bickering and or whatever, like this is life. Like it's not like that waiting forward. So I just love that poem. I think it's great. And it's conversational and yet it's poetic. So now the prompt. So you can write a scene or a short play with 2 or more characters. This is your recipe. It will begin either just after something big happened or just before, it should say just before something big is about to happen, some event or unexpected event. Avoid talking or explaining what that big thing is or will be for as long as possible, if at all. Don't ignore that, choose the 5 following things. I wrote this like 3 minutes before class. So ignore, choose 5 of the following, it comes later. Then the other, so that was number 3. Number 4 is one of your characters is holding a grudge. And we may or may not come to know what that grudge is. That should not have a, I didn't check my formatting, bullet point. And then now choose 5 of the following things. Take a minute and get an image off the following list. Get an image in your mind of each before beginning to write. And then as you write your piece, connect all of those things and do everything above. And honestly, if that's too much to keep juggling, you can keep looking at it. Maybe we can double the screen or something, or I can, here are the images. Do you have the next page? So some of these are tangible things, some of them are intangible. So if it's something like loneliness, just write an image, like jot down next to it, like old woman sitting by window, like whatever comes to your head. Sunscreen, obviously, that's pretty clear. You could just mention sunscreen. So those are like, you'll pick off 5 things off that list for a minute. Maybe do that first and then go back to the other prompt, which has the instructions. And just like pick 5 without thinking about it.
Hello, hello. A nice big old chunk of writing time. Yay, 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 yay. Thank you so much, Stefanie.
Hi, guys.
Thank you
Carol.
so much, Stefanie. Thank you.
And Carol and Stephen and I see you guys here. I look so hi for those of you I know, and hello to those I don't.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye. All, thank you for joining us again on this Friday, May 1st. I really don't know how it became May still. Thank you. Having you here, really, that's what makes these a success, is having you all here. So thank you for joining us. Take care, everyone.